this?
I was just saying, my understanding of Redux is it's like a place to store state, but like one place to store state so that different components can access state without having to pass it down through multiple components.
Excellent. So I'm going to delete all of this because we're not just talking about state. We're talking about state management is what we're talking about here. Okay. A different way of how, or it's like, I would say a way of, I'm going to use it like this. A different way of passing state around. And it sort of all comes from one place. Redux, a popular library for it would be Redux. We'll say the most popular library was Redux. Now that actually is currently changing in the industry. And the reason why is because I don't know exactly when it got created, but React actually created their own state management library. And this state management library is called Context. To give you some context about Context, I have talked to some people who got like jobs at companies and they're like sort of new into the industry. And it's like, I've heard it floated around as one of the cool, hot new ways of doing React. Like kind of like people may have told you that hooks is a cool way. Context is a way for state management that I've heard has a little buzz around it. Is it better than Redux? It's different. Redux is known for having a little bit more barrier to entry. It takes a lot more boilerplate code to get it started. And it's also not like React's native thing anymore. It's a totally separate package. But there are advantages to Redux over Context that I don't know how to understand because I'm not that smart. So we're going to go ahead, and now that you kind of have a rough idea of what Context is, we're going to show you maybe how it can be used. And does everybody have their thing cloned down, ran npm install? Is it running up on your screen? Everything's good. We're getting it. All righty. So first, let's go ahead and just take a look at my little 30-minute creation. Okay. So we've got our, where's my code? Here it is. And then let me go ahead and just pull up my Chrome screen. I'm very used to dual monitors. Back when I was a teacher, I was very comfortable on one monitor all the time. Let's see if I can crush it now. So this is the app, right? All it is, your basic Rick and Morty build and burn. I'm sure y'all have had plenty of these, okay? Now, the difference between mine and other people's is that this is a little bit prepped for some, I would say, some styling changes. Let me actually go ahead and do the good old splitter here. Where's my code? There we go. Beautiful. Move this out of the way. Move this thing out of the way. All right. The reason why I wanted to split this for a bit was just to show you some of the styling on how we're going to actually affect this change. Is I created some styling to where, like, our classes, hopefully I don't mess this up. Let's see. Like, for example, if I go into my header component, I should be able to change this from container light to container dark. And now it should change the style of that to dark. And for some reason, there's this padding at the top that I couldn't figure out how to fix. But also, for example, this H1 should actually have a class of, the header is a contrasted color. So I would maybe make the class of this. I'm going to have to do some of the styling as I go because I just didn't necessarily account for everything, but I would probably give this a style of, I would say, text dark. This should be, oh, text dark. Oh, text light is what it should be. There we go. The header is the only one that's a little weird because it's the opposite color of everything else. So I could have been a little bit better about this, but I figured it would be easier to kind of see what's going on this way. But that's how we're going to sort of change these things. And the goal is I'm going to have like a piece of state effectively that controls whether or not the entire app is either light or dark, and change what this class is based off of that. Does that logic seem fairly simple to grasp at first, and maybe how context is going to tie into that? Cool. Fist of 5 on if people understand how that change is going to be affected in the app once we get this context stuff configured. Fist of 5 means, I don't know if they've been doing it, but that means you show me something on your hand, a number 1 through 5. A fist is, I don't understand what the hell is going on. And a 5 is, I am golden right now. All right, good. That's what I like to see. Sweet. All right. So what we're going to go ahead and do is ignore this thing right there. Let's do it the traditional way first, and we'll just do it with the header. Okay, we won't do it with the rest of the app because I think we'll kind of walk through that when we get there on the other way of doing it. So let's go ahead, and I'm just curious. Let's say I want to do useState to control whether or not the header is light theme or dark theme. Does anybody have any suggestions on how I would start that out? I'm gonna call out someone.
I would, in our app, I would make a new const for like with the array.
Okay.
The first item is, first item would be like theme maybe, or
Love it.
and then set theme.
Beautiful.
And we could
Okay.
instantiate it with like true or false or light or dark or however we want to deal with.
Yeah, we'll start it off with light. Now, awesome. So I'm doing that. Now, how do I pass it into my header? We'll just worry about the header for now, and then we'll worry about the rest later. Anybody know how I would pass that piece of state into my header? I don't know how to pronounce your name, but Guilherme, is that correct?
Yeah, the name is correct, but I don't know.
Oh, yes. Lucky guess. Give it a shot. How do I pass the state of whether or not it is light or dark into the header? I'll give you a hint. If you're not comfortable with hooks, this step would be the exact same whether or not you're doing classes or hooks. You just pass it right in. How do I pass it in? Where does that get passed into?
That goes into your JSX there for your header.
Yep. So
And you can just do it just like on the line below with characters. You're just going to do the same thing.
Yep. State gets passed through as an attribute on the element. So I will say theme equals, and then I'm going to escape my JSX by using curly braces. I'm going to say theme equals my theme that I have up here. We're not going to worry about the set theme for now. And now what we're going to do is in our header, we're just going to go ahead and maybe show, I literally made a little spot here that said insert theme here. And I'm just going to say, let's dump theme in there. Will this code work when I save it? Any thoughts?
You need to pass the props into the constructor of the header.
Beautiful. Yeah, so you could do it a couple ways. This function takes in props. So one way you can do it is you can say const theme equals props dot theme. And now that should all work, and let's prove it. Awesome. And now see how this says light theme because I passed the text value of light down, right? Or I could also do I could also destructure it. So I could say const theme equals props, bam. Or the next step would be to just destructure it right from, I wouldn't necessarily call this thing a constructor because a constructor is a OOP concept. I think you would just call it the parameters of the argument. But that was exactly what it would be. Just being nitpicky here. That was a really good way of phrasing it though. So you can just destructure it right there in the parameters. of the argument. And now everything is working beautifully. We're not going to worry about how we change the theme, or if you want, we could do a quick button that changes the theme if we want. Let's say in our app, maybe we want to put a button here and change theme. All right, so what would I do to make this button change the theme? What would I make my on click function for this button? Any ideas?
Set theme.
Yeah. Except for that's going to set it to what? What objects gets passed
Light.
into set theme here?
The event.
Yeah, the event, exactly. So what we have to do is do I have to create a function somewhere else, or can I just do it right here inside of here? And if so, how? Any ideas? Does anybody know what an anonymous function is? Cool. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to create an anonymous function. And I am going to, inside of that anonymous function, I'm going to take the action of setting the theme to, well, if it's light, I want to set it to dark. If it's dark, I want to set it to light. So I will say set theme, and I will say maybe the current theme is equal to light. If it's equal to light, then set it to dark. Otherwise, set it to light. And that, oh, oops, probably should works around that thing.
Hey, John, could you make your code just a little bit larger, like one step?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking that. Also, I could close that. Thank you for.
There we go. Perfect. Thank you.
Sweet. No, I appreciate you saying that. Sweet. So giving this a save now, this should change from light to dark. There we go. Cool. All righty. So now, anybody have an idea on how maybe I would change whether or not this is light or dark? The header's a little weird because I have to flip it. Because remember, the header is kind of like going to be the header is like the contrasting element. So I do have to kind of flip it. I'm not the best at like actual design principles. But basically, I have to get, if this thing is dark theme, then this should be light. If this thing is light theme, this should say dark. So what I might do, if it's going to be useful in multiple places, I might do something like opposite theme. I don't know. This is not the greatest code ever written, but I might say if theme equals light, whoops, then dark, otherwise light. Do people understand? Is everybody kind of understanding that ternary statement I just wrote there? Fist of 5 on that. How are y'all with ternaries? Good? Sweet. Okay. So what I might do is say here, okay, my class is actually going to be, now I have to wrap this in JSX. Bam, and I will just do plus opposite theme. I could do string interpolation as well. I just don't feel like it. And hey, look, now I'm changing that theme. And maybe I'll do it here too. So we'll go text. Plus opposite theme. Oh, I got an extra. Oh, wait, yeah, that's right. Okay, cool. So now as I change this, bam, 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 bam. This is the ugliest dark mode you've ever seen, but it is dark mode nonetheless. So everybody's good following all of that logic so far. All right, now we're going to actually get into the cool stuff, context. How can I do this without having to pass theme through? That's a great question. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to use this thing called context. Context actually comes off of the React object. So kind of like these are all coming off of, like, another syntax for this is import React. Oh, whoops. Import React, and these chunks of React from React. You could also, I don't know if anybody knew you could do this. You could also write like react.useState or something like that if you wanted to. But we're going to destructure it out because we can. React has a function called createContext. Okay. What exactly a context is, I think it's going to be better to see that in action and kind of get a feel for it. Okay. So what we're going to do is somewhere at the top of our code here, we're going to create a context. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say const, we'll call it theme context. And we are going to say theme context equals create context. Bam. And that should be all we need to create our context. But what we need to do is we need to say, all right, we need to wrap any component that is going to be aware of this context of like what theme is. It needs to be wrapped by a provider. So how do we do this? It may not look like it, but this actually creates an element called theme context. So in other words, down here, I can go ahead and create an element called theme context like that. Now you might be a little confused. Obviously there's a bunch of red on the thing. That's because it's not nested inside something, or really it's because this whole element is not returning one thing right now. But you might be a little confused by the fact that I'm taking a custom element and I have an opening tag and a closing tag. That is actually valid in React. In fact, most of the times that you see a single element, you can actually replace it with a double element if you want to, but there's not really a huge advantage, like for example, in this case. But just to prove to you that it can be done, watch how this doesn't break my code. I don't know if you've ever done anything like this. It does not break your code. There's actually a use case for this, and that maybe will be a different lesson. I don't know. We'll find out. But the point is, some elements are actually two-part, and a context kind of has to be by nature. So here's what we're going to go ahead and do. We're going to create an element for theme context, and we're going to pull out a sub-element of that called provider. Okay. So now I'm going to take this element here, delete that one, move it down here. Bam. Oh, what did I mess up? Doesn't like something that I did. Closing tag for header. Oh, because I forgot to fix this back to being self-closing. And there we go. Now notice how this didn't really change anything in my app. This element doesn't actually add anything to your page, but it actually modifies all of the components inside of here to be aware of this theme context. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you just get it right out of the box. You do have to configure some stuff. We'll talk about that in a bit. But now what we need to do is inside of this theme context provider, we need to show a value. Okay. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm just going to say value. We'll set it to light theme. Okay. Bam. So now we have a value set to light theme. And awesome. Great. I'm not using it though. So right now, this code is everything with theme, set theme. So what we're going to try and do right now is we are going to break our app. And what I'm going to do is on click, I'm going to get rid of this set theme, or actually, I'm going to keep that logic there. So I'm just going to comment that out. And I'm going to get rid of this line of code. And we're not going to pass this in anymore because we don't have to. Bada boom, bada bing, bam. Now we're going to break stuff probably. Oh, we didn't break anything because it just is showing that there's no theme being passed in. So yeah, it's undefined. It's popping up there. But this theme is clearly not being passed in, even though we have a theme created from our context. So this is where the kind of beauty of context comes in. What you can do, and the alternative way to pass state around, is you can import a context. Oh, theme is not defined. There we go. Now we finally broke it. That's what we wanted to do. Great. So we need to get rid of theme. I'm going to comment out this line of code for now. Oh, there's a whole bunch. You know what? We're just going to hard code const theme equals light. We're instead of hard coding it, we're going to hard code opposite theme. I want to break this app while creating the least work as possible. So the only thing I'm referencing here is opposite theme. So I'm just going to say not configured yet or something like that. And now I can understand what's going on at least. So opposite theme is not defined. I thought I just defined it. What? There we go. Okay, now it's not breaking, but it doesn't really do anything. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to import that context. So I create first, if I want to import it, I first have to export it. So I can do export const. Now, a mistake that I made 5 minutes before this class was I was just not importing it correctly, but it's actually pretty easy to import. I just say import, and then I have to destructure it out because again, this is not export default. It's just export. So I'm going to say import, and what is it called? Theme context from that file that it's located in is // app. Okay. Now we can, I believe I should be able to just dump the theme context in here. Let me see. Let's find out. If I refresh the page, will it show? No, you cannot do that. Never mind. Okay, what we can do though, and what you have to do to pull out that theme is we can use a hook called useContext. So just like all that other stuff we had, we're going to go ahead and import this hook called good Lord, called useContext from React. Bam. And now if we want to pull out what the value of that theme is, we can go ahead and say const theme is going to equal, we'll say use context of the theme context. Kind of makes sense. We're saying use context and then we dump a context into that, right? Like that's kind of intuitive. And then let's go ahead and try and see if this works. Bam, it works. Everything's configured. So this theme came from this value, not here. You just create a context. You don't need to add anything in there. All right, somebody asked me some questions. I want to hear some thoughtful curiosity here. Nobody's gotten any questions on what's going on here? Nothing?
So like, as opposed to a Redux store, you only have access to this way of state if you wrap it in a provider?
Correct. I don't actually know how Redux store works. I've never used it. So
Okay.
I'm not going to be the best to speak on that. From the things that I've researched, a Redux store is better if you have a really complicated project because it literally just works more efficiently as far as like under the hood. It's literally faster if you have a larger amount of state. But for most projects, I think people choose context these days because it's just simpler code. And usually the cost of like maintaining a code base is less than the cost of an app running slightly slower. So there are places though, from what I could tell, where Redux makes sense. And from the things I've read, context does not necessarily replace Redux, but it does replace Redux a lot of the time, if that makes sense. I don't know Redux though. That also didn't really answer your question. That was just a random rabbit hole tangent that I went on. So sorry. All righty. How are y'all feeling about all this so far? Like, are you understanding what's going on in the code? Like, is it feeling fairly clear, the connections being drawn between things? All right, awesome. Now we're about to go and take this a step further and throw in another hook, because here's the thing that we can't do yet. Boop, 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 boop. Nothing. Okay. So before we do anything, we need to do a little bit. How we're doing on time? We're doing okay. So we need to do a little bit of a build and burn with, I would say, useReducer. Okay. So I want to go ahead and look up the docs for useReducer because I don't use it often enough to where it's like committed to my memory. I use it often enough to where I could figure it out when I have to. So you'll find that that's like a lot of things in coding. You're going to be like, oh, I can figure this out when I need to, but I don't necessarily remember every little chunk about it. And that's probably where you want to be, your first couple of years. You want to be able to figure shit out. So we're going to go ahead and look up useReducer. And I just want to double check my logic. useReducer, reducer, initial argument. Those are really the main things that we want. Okay. So before we actually do a huge example with it, I just want to do a simple one. So we're going to go ahead, import useReducer and play around with it for a second. So that way we can kind of understand what useReducer does independently of the useContext, and then we can sort of tie them together rather than me just showing you a bunch of useReducer code and being like, here's how you do it. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to import my useReducer. Okay. Now what we're going to do is I think I want to make a piece of state called button text. Okay. And I guarantee you at the end, things are going to get a little fucky and you're going to be like, what exactly is going on? Because it's kind of like tying together a bunch of new concepts to you. But I figure if I throw it out there, I record it, you should be able to use it on a project eventually. So the goal would be to introduce you to the concept, and then you should be able to figure it out mostly. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and call these two things. So our first thing is our state. Our state is like the value that we have. It's going to be exactly like, I don't know, state in useState. It's the exact same thing. The only difference is now, instead of just something that allows you to set the state, we have a function that allows you to set the state in different ways. Now that might sound confusing, but that's exactly what a dispatch is. It allows you to do different types of changes to the state. Okay. And it's a function that does it just like, I don't know, set state would be. So what I'm going to do is we're going to say useReducer. We're going to plug in our argument is going to be our reducer. So bam, our reducer is the function that handles the logic of how we want to change state. Our initial argument is like the initial value of state. And I think init is something that you don't need to use for right now, but it's like, I can't remember exactly what init does, but you don't need to use it. I think it's like a function that runs when it initializes, but I don't worry about it. You don't need it for right now for this understanding. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to type in initial value. So our reducer, we're going to make a function called reducer up there. So I'm going to actually call it reducer, not recuser. And then we'll have an initial value. So maybe we'll set the initial value equal to 0 or something like that. That's, I think, a good start. Okay. Let's go ahead and make a reducer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a function right here. Don't want to deal with a bunch of imports. I just want you to be able to see all the code right in front of your face. So I'm going to make a function called reducer. This function is going to take in an action and a payload. Now, it doesn't actually have to take in an action and a payload. This is a design choice on how we're writing the function because it allows us freedom later on. But we actually don't have to do it this way. In fact, let's not do it this way. I am just going to go ahead in this reducer. I am going to return 9,000. Okay, I'm going to hard code a value of 9,000 just to show you that whatever this function returns is going to be the new state that is created. Does that make sense? So we're going to rename this state. We're going to call it count. Actually, we're going to call it power level because Dragon Ball Z. And this dispatch, we can call this, I don't know, power level dispatch. Okay. All right, so let's walk through this again one more time. These are our variables that we can use in our render. The useReducer hook takes a reducer, which is a function that chooses the new value of state. And the next value of it in it, that's 0, is just the initial state. So let's go ahead and I'm going to change, I don't know, I guess what I'll do is I'll change the value. This should work. I'm just going to change the value instead of this saying change theme, just because it's already an element on the page. I'm just going to have this say change. We'll just do count in here. So I'm going to go ahead, or power level. Actually, I'll make new buttons. I think that'd be better. So I'm going to make a couple buttons. Bam. For now, we'll just do. I don't like the idea. I'm going to make an H1 element down here. So let's go ahead and just do an H1. This is going to be a pretty hideous project, but power level is going to equal power level. Oh, I called it power lever. Well, that's also a word that could make sense. We're going to go with power level. So first, let's just see what this does. And then I will say, we'll worry about this button after. For now. Cool. Where'd my power level go? Is it not showing on there for some reason? Oh, I think it's because let me make a little box so that way everything shows up neatly. If we'll call this action buttons container or something like that. And I'm just going to go to my app.css. By the way, something that I neglected learning until fairly recently was styling stuff. I was really bad at styling for a very long time. What do we call it? Class. I didn't call it anything. ID equals, I don't know, I'll just call it nav bar. Not a nav bar, but it kind of is styled like a nav bar, so I'll call it a nav bar. And we'll just say nav bar. And we're going to do display flex. Then we'll do flex direction row. And that still didn't work. Oh, I bet I know why. I think it's there. It's just white text. Let's see. Hopefully I can use one of my classes and say, okay, this H1 should have a class of text light. Text dark. Oh man. Well, now I just don't know what's going on. Let's see. Dev tools. Sorry about that, y'all. Title, class. Let's see. Is it not even showing up? Interesting. Text that. Wow. If anybody spots the issue, please.
This
feel
is
free.
maybe silly, but did you try refreshing?
Oh gosh, I did not. Oh,
I did the same thing.
indeed, it was not silly. Look at that. Okay, cool. So now we have our power level of 0. This is our initial state. Yeah, we all make those mistakes. I don't care how long you've been coding. I've watched very good people, very much so better than me, do it. Now I'm actually wondering if I even need this div, but I don't know. I'm going to leave it just because why not? So the purpose is really just to show you what's going on. It doesn't have to be a beautiful project. Okay. So This thing is literally just the initial state value that we set. Now, let's make it, when I click this, let's make another button. And let's make this button say, oh, I don't know. For right now, we're going to say trigger the reducer. Right? And all that this is going to do is right now, when I trigger this reducer, I am going to click power level dispatch, which actually is basically just triggers this reducer function. Okay. So now when I click this, it should set it to 9,000. Did I mess something up? Hang on a second. Power level dispatch, reducer, return 9,000. I'm wondering if it needs to be more opinionated. Like, do I need to actually add more? I thought this would work. I know that, hang on, let me double check the dots. Use reducer initial count. The reducer. Oh, the reducer has to take in a state, an action. Still don't understand why. That wouldn't necessarily. Hang on. I'm going to try throwing in these variables and seeing if it actually matters. Cool. And it's still not working. Let's see. I have my reducer set up. I don't do this all the time.
I think you're clicking the wrong button.
That is exactly what it is. Again, I have to refresh. There you go. I was exactly correct. You don't need these. Good Lord. So I refresh it, starts at 0. I do this, and then it just returns the new value of state, right? Okay. Woohoo. Yeah. Man, I need to code in front of people more often again. So it goes. But yeah, so all it's doing is it's returning the new value of state. What we can do, though, is we can now add these two little things here. We can say, what if we can plug in an object? And that object can have a state. What do they want? State and action, right? Yeah. State and action. So we're just going to plug in a state and action. And let's start with, now what we're going to do is we have to be a little bit more descriptive right here. So maybe the purpose of writing the code that we're about to write is that I could do something here where I could maybe say, oh, okay, let's plug in the current state. So we'll make an object, and the state on this object is going to be, I guess, our current state, which is power level. And our action is going to be some choice on what we do. So maybe I will say increment. And what this will do is it will take the previous state and increment it by 1. Okay. Oh, actually, they did it as separate arguments. I guess this, I'm only going to separate this because I think it's better convention. I don't think you could do it either way. But I will do it the way that they recommend. So they're just saying that the first argument should be state, but you could do it where state is part of the object. Don't stress too much about it. And then the action for right now will be increment. You'll see later that we can be more flexible with the action and how it works. Cool. State is not defined because this should be power level. Bam, bam, bam. All right, cool. So now what we need to do is we need to write some logic that says, okay, if this action is equal to increment, then return state plus 1 or something like that. In this case, right? Because it's a power level and I just want to increment it by 1. So that's it. So now what I can do is when I trigger this reducer, what did I mess up? Increment. If action equals increment. So what did we do? We did power level and then increment So power level dispatch. Let's go ahead and do a good old console.log. We'll just do state and action right there. See what we're getting. Oh, there's a good old unique key thing. I haven't really. Oh, I have class on. So it's probably not a bad idea to do some cleanup. This should be class name. Doodle-doo. Header has something called class. I have used class. I don't work in. I've been doing a lot of React Native work, so I'm definitely not the like fastest with web styling right now, but competent. All right, let's go ahead and see. I have to go to my character section and just fix the classes. The class name. And then also with this character card section, I do need to add, if anybody ever gets that unique issue, it's so easy to change. It's so easy to fix. The way that I do it is a map can technically have a second argument called an index. And all you got to do is on this element, just say p equals, and then some unique value. In this case, I'll use index. Bam. And now that error should go away. This isn't necessarily going to fix everything, but it should help me figure out what the hell is going on in my code, because now I can read more. So I'm going to go to my app, and that took like a minute. So it's always worth fixing those issues, even if it feels like it's not worth it. Just fix them. That's my tip of the day. Okay. So now, okay, cool. Interesting. So the first time the state got plugged in as 0, and then it said increment was the action. What did I mess up here? Power level dispatch. So I triggered my reducer, and the state, whoops. Did I get rid of my console log? Whoops. Console.log state. Let's see. Gotta refresh it again. It's weird that it doesn't auto refresh. I don't know. 0, 0. Why is 0 getting past it? Did I plug this in right? Power level dispatch. Power level. Let's look at an example, because maybe.
Well, power level is instantiated at 0. So if you're passing it in.
Oh, you know what? The state gets passed in at default. I think all of this, actually, I think the state gets passed in as a default argument, and you just pass in increment as the main thing. So the thing that you're actually dumping in here is the action. I think it automatically passes state in. It assumes that it's going off of the previous state. Sorry about that. Let's see if I'm right. So now, if I'm right, the state should be 0, and then the action should be increment. And there we go. That's what we wanted, right? Sorry about that. And it's also working now. Bam. Great. So now we can get a little more flexible with this and say, oh, okay, actually this action is going to look like this. Maybe the action looks a little bit something like this. Maybe you have a type, and the type would be increment. And then a payload would be like, by how much? So maybe we want to do by 3. Okay. And this is just to show you like what a payload would be for. So in other words, maybe I do 2 increment buttons. And we'll change the name of these so that way it's clearer. But we'll do 1 increment button that's increment by 1. Another increment button that's increment by 2. So I'll just say like +1, +2, or we'll do +10. I think it's probably just going to be visually easier to see. And then now what we can do is in our dispatch, we can say, okay, we're going to make the type of change that we're going to do is an increment. And then the payload will be, this is the +10. So we'll say 10. Okay. I'm going to copy and paste this because it's easier than rewriting code. Bam, bam, bam. And now we still have to refactor this reducer to basically say, this should now say action.type. And return state plus action.payload. And for example, now we can do things like, I got to refresh the page again. +1, +10, bam. All right, so how does everyone feel on like what useReducer is doing? It's kind of like an alternative to useState. Y'all feel good about that? You're not really going to fully understand it until you mess with it a few times. And I like to show it this way as opposed to the alternative. When you do it, when you look up docs, what they're going to do is they're going to have either a case statement or a dynamic dispatch or something in this section that basically is handling logic of different actions in state. And I think that sometimes people need to start simpler and just say, like, literally, this reducer, all its purpose is to just update the state. And whatever you return is the updated value for state. Make sense? Now I'm going to kind of get this to what we would want maybe a reducer. We're going to get rid of all this power level stuff. And we're going to talk about how we can use this with useContext. And then we'll call it a day. And I'll allow you to, if you want to, refactor this to where you can get all the theme stuff changing. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is delete all this power level stuff. Bam. We're going to refresh this page. Bam. Whatever. Close enough. Sweet. So this change theme needs to ultimately change our state. So let's imagine we have a state that equals either light or dark. Nothing fancy. Okay. So our state is going to look something like this. Light or dark. And then our action is going to equal, I don't know, toggle. It's really going to be our only action. Or if we want, you could do set to light, set to dark, whatever. But I think toggle is pretty much what you're going to do with a theme all of the time. So what I might do here is say something like, if action.type is equal to toggle, right? You don't really need a payload. So I'll just leave it like that. Return if the state is equal to, I don't know, light, maybe return dark. Oh, that should be a question mark. Else return light. Cool. And already we can see an advantage to this over maybe like set state, right? Because let's say I'm setting state from dark to light or whatever, right? Well, if I'm doing that, I have to check. Okay, is the state currently light? Because if it's light, I want to make it dark. If it's dark, I want to make it light. Here, I'm encapsulating all that logic inside of the reducer. So now what I can do is anywhere else where I call this reducer in my code, I'll say, hey, on this reducer, just toggle. You use the toggle thing, and it becomes kind of like easy to understand what's going on. That's one of the things I like about useReducer. But so anyways, this is what our reducer does. What we're going to do now is we're going to create a theme. Wait, I have to think for this. Our value, this is where it gets a little trippy here. So now what we have to do is we have to create a reducer for theme. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say const, and I guess we could say like theme, and then theme dispatch is going to equal useReducer, and we'll first dump into that. Oh, I keep mistyping that for whatever reason. The first thing we'll dump into that is the reducer that we're using, right? So we'll use our reducer. And the second thing will be the initial state. So we'll start like, I don't know, light theme, whatever theme you want to default to. Now here's the tricky part here. So what we're going to do is the value that we provide here is no longer going to be the value of our theme. Instead of being the value of our theme, we're going to have an object here. To do an object, we need two curly braces because two sets of curly braces. The first one to escape the JSX, the next one to just actually be an object. And on this object, we are going to say that the dispatch is going to equal, or actually we can call it theme dispatch, right? Theme dispatch is going to equal theme dispatch. And our theme is going to equal the theme. Cool. This should break things. See if I'm right. It broke things. I wonder why. Well, let's go into our header where we're pulling out that theme. Here we're saying that the theme equals use context, theme context. But right now, that means that this theme actually is returning an object, where this object has the dispatch from the reducer, and it also has the theme from the reducer. So what we actually need to do is pull out the theme and the theme dispatch. So actually, we're only using the theme, so we could just pull out the theme without pulling the theme dispatch. And we actually don't use the theme dispatch inside of the header anyways. So I would say we actually don't really need to add a theme dispatch into the header. So we can just pull out the theme from the theme context, and that's great. And hey, look, it's working. We are getting our light theme. Now what I can do is in my change theme, what I can do here, I already have access to the reducer from the app. So maybe what we'll do is, I don't know, this is obviously like a dumb idea, but as far as like how it looks, but just to illustrate the point, what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and import that theme context in my character section. Okay. Theme context from ... app. Bam. So I have my theme context, and then I also need to import use context, right, from React. And now, because both the dispatch and the theme for the dispatch are being passed around by the provider, I can access both of them from the use context hook. I don't need to pass around that use reducer all the time. So I can just say const theme and theme dispatch is going to be equal to use context, theme context. Bam. And now let's say I want to make a button in here. So I will do another button. In fact, I'm just going to take that change theme and copy it over. So let's see, copy this button and we'll put it right. Bam. So now I have a button. I know that that's the most beautiful styling you've probably ever seen in your life. Great UI design right there. That's a joke. And on this click, what we can do is we can trigger this theme dispatch and say, okay, what do we want to do? We want to provide a type of toggle. And now it should toggle the theme. Bam, look at that. It's working. See that? Furthermore, I could take this and without having to keep passing it through, let's say I want to skip this component, right? Maybe I don't actually want it to be here. Maybe I want it to be in a totally different spot. Let's go ahead and take that and instead dump that into a character card, which is also a horrible UI decision. Okay, being able to change the theme from inside of every single character card does not make a whole lot of sense. So I need to import that. So I could say const theme dispatch equals use context and then theme context. Bam. And now everything should work. And hey, look, I could change the theme here. I could change the theme here. But notice what I don't have to do is pass it through from parent to child to child to child, so on and so forth. I don't have to do that anymore. All right. How do y'all feel about all that? Y'all feel like it's a cool thing? Are y'all going to try it out maybe on your next project? It's not too bad, right? Like, it's a little weird, but it's not, there's not a whole lot of setup to it. I've been recording this so I can upload it to YouTube and send it to y'all. Alrighty. How y'all feeling? Do y'all have any questions? Ask me something. When I would use it, who knows? I know y'all gotta have questions. Speak up. I will force people to ask questions. You think I'm
I
playing?
so I am. So my question is, when you use this, and currently I'm creating a chat app,
Sure.
and the messages are being sent, but they're not. The state is not reloading, and so I'm not sure what you did looked like it worked, but what I did, I don't know the similarity. Trying to compare the similarities of the two.
Are you using
Yeah.
use context or use?
Yeah, I'm using use context. Then I'm
Alright.
wrapping the entire thing as a child.
So why don't we go ahead and let's look at your code? I think, would you mind sharing it with everybody? Because I have a hunch that there's a good thing to be taught here, if you're willing.
Yes.
To share.
It's also with TypeScript. That's
Oh,
okay.
sick. I'm not good at React with TypeScript, just so you know.
Okay. No problem.
That's adventurous.
Wait.
A great choice, by the way, trying to do TypeScript.
Thank you. So currently I'm using so this is like the content provider.
Context provider, yeah. Got it. So we have a. Are you using Redux or the? Can I see your? Where are you? Oh, okay, I see. Wait a second. Do you have? Okay, I kind of see your code.
So it's very similar to what you did. The only difference is when I use the useReducer. So I'm using it as a wrapper, and so I'm just passing the child. When I use a useReducer, and let's say like I submit a new message, the updated value is not being passed to the dashboard.
Values is all chats, and then I'm confused. Your CTX provider is a function with all chats dispatch. So you're saying, oh, wait a minute. Oh, I see. You're making the children there. And then your values is all chats, and then send action, chat action, user. Where's your send chat action user? Oh, okay. Socket.
Right here.
It feels like there's a little bit of disorganization here. Like, where's your reducer? Identify your reducer for me.
Right here.
Okay. It feels like your send chat action should be part of your reducer, right? In other words, it shouldn't be what you're sending. It should be part of, like, in other words, the whole value to a reducer is that you send your reducer to all your components. So now all your components have access to your reducer. Then let's say you want to add a chat message. You handle the logic for adding that chat message inside of the reducer. So in this line of code where you have switch action.type, you're saying receive message, then you're getting return whatever the state was before, but now you're also adding a topic, which is of type. Whoa, this line of code between 34 and 41 is a little confusing to me. Oh, I see. It's just oh, okay. You're adding a topic.
I'm adding to the topic, then all the topic state, then the messages to that particular topic.
Right, but the colon there is you're specifying the type of that. So you're saying that, like, oh, okay, wait, never mind. Oh, okay, I see. You're saying that the topic in that key is going to equal, okay, I misread that for a second. It's an array where you're pulling out, oh, okay, the previous state of that topic, and then, okay, never mind. And then you're adding the from and the message. The from and the message is coming from your action.payload. So your action.payload is the message. Okay, cool. Great. So the send chat action, here's my thing. With your context provider, your value on that, why are you actually at sending send chat action in there? Shouldn't send chat action be like a reducer function? Because what I'm thinking is you have like a function that says like case send message. And when you send a message, you do two things. You emit with the socket, and then you also add to your state, right?
Yes.
So it seems to me like that's what you should be doing in there, is you should have another case where maybe your action is send message, send underscore message or something like that. And then in that, you trigger your send chat action function. Does that make sense?
Okay.
That's probably the way I would do it. And then you go to your place where you're defining your values, right? So
The values right here.
yeah. So your values is like basically the state, the piece of state that you're changing. So send chat action doesn't need to be sent with that, right? Because send chat action should probably be triggered inside of your reducer. So in other words, your values that you would dump in there would be your state, your value of all your chats. But then also one of the things that you would pass in there would be your dispatch for that. Does that make sense?
Okay.
So what I would do is pass the dispatch into your values. Does that make sense?
I think so.
So go ahead. I'm gonna upload this video. Go back and watch it and notice that the things that I passed into the values that get passed around everywhere are two things. It's the state that you're tracking and the values for the state that you're tracking. I'm sorry, the dispatch for the state that you're tracking. So then the whole point of that design pattern is you use that dispatch to do all the fancy shit. So you say, oh, I need to add a chat. In order to add a chat, I need to do a few things. I need to add this object into my state, but then I also need to emit this socket. So you do all of that inside of that action inside of your reducer. Does that clear things up a little bit?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
sometimes it just takes some iteration. Do you understand how props children is working, by the way? That's kind of confusing at first.
Yes. So the props children right here is just a React node. Then what I do is inside the app, I just wrap it around
Yep.
as a component.
So in that case, the props, it just passes everything. That's what I was saying basically about like the opening and closing tags in React.
Yeah.
It's actually really cool once you get used to it.
Yeah, it definitely
I
is.
think you can figure it out. I think go back and really try to trace, like, why would I want to send this emit socket thing when I could have it done in my reducer? So I would try and dump that logic into your reducer. That was a little bit, I'm imagining that was less beneficial to other people than I thought it would be because there's just a lot going on here. TypeScript is tough at first to look at.
Oh yeah, it definitely is. I'm still working on it.
It's a good choice though. It's a good choice because people love that shit. You wind up writing better code. Like, here's the thing. If you can get good at TypeScript, you're learning JavaScript a lot deeper. So it's not like, oh, I'm learning TypeScript, so that's instead of JavaScript. Like, no, you're learning TypeScript and it's forcing you to learn JavaScript way better. That's the thing that I've realized about TypeScript.
Yeah, that's what I've noticed too.
All right.
Okay.
I'm gonna head out and get some water.
Okay.
Do you have any questions, Alex?
No, I was just absorbing. Thank you though.
All right, y'all have a good one.
You too.
You too.